The sun hung low over the wide Texas plains, painting the dust-covered road in gold as Elijah crossrode slowly through the edge of the town he now owned more than lived in. Folks whispered his name with awe and fear alike. Rich cowboy, cattle king, railroad investor, a man who had clawed his way up from nothing and never looked back. His boots were polished, his coat tailored, his horse the finest money could buy. At his side rode his young son, Daniel, no more than 8 years old, sharp-eyed and quiet in a way that made grown men uneasy. Elijah had taught the boy strength. Early, taught him that softness was weakness, and memory was a burden best buried. As they passed the general store, the saloon, the bank with Elijah's name etched in brass, a woman sat near the wooden steps, wrapped in rags that barely fought the cold. Her hair was matted, her face hollow, hands trembling, as she clutched a tin cup that rattled weakly when someone dropped a coin. Elijah didn't slow. He'd seen beggars before. Life had chewed them up, same as it nearly had him, and he had learned long ago that looking back only reopened wounds better left sealed. But then Daniel stiffened in his saddle. His small hand tightened on the reins. His breath caught. Elijah barely noticed until the boy whispered, his voice shaking, "Father, that's Ma." The world stopped. Elijah's heart slammed against his ribs like a wild horse. He looked again, really looked, and the years folded in on themselves. Beneath the dirt and hunger and ruin, he saw her. Sarah. The woman he had loved before gold hardened his heart. The woman he had left behind when ambition screamed louder than loyalty. Memories crashed into him. Sarah standing at the fence of their small homestead, belly swollen with child, eyes begging him not to go west chasing money and power. He had promised to send for her, promised. Then the money came. Then the deals. Then the silence. Elijah had told himself she'd moved on, told himself she'd be fine. Now she sat broken on the ground, while his son, recognized her without hesitation. Daniel slid off his horse before Elijah could stop him, running through the dust to kneel in front of her. "Ma," he whispered again, tears streaking his face. Sarah looked up slowly, confusion clouding her eyes until they locked onto the boy. Her cup fell. Coins scattered. Her lips trembled as she reached out with shaking fingers, touching Daniel's cheek like she was afraid he'd vanish. "Danny?" she breathed, the name cracking, her voice open. The town went silent. People gathered, sensing something rare and raw unfolding. Elijah dismounted, every step toward them heavier than the last. He wanted to run, wanted to turn back time, wanted to explain, but there were no words strong enough. Sarah's eyes lifted to him then. No anger, no accusation, just exhaustion and a pain so deep it hollowed him out. "You grew rich," she said softly. "I grew forgotten." Elijah fell to his knees in the dust, his wealth meaningless in that moment. He tried to speak, but guilt strangled every sound. Daniel clung to his mother, sobbing openly now. And for the first time, Elijah understood the true cost of walking away. He lifted Sarah gently, feeling how light she was, how fragile. "Come home," he said, voice breaking. "Please. Let me make this right." Sarah didn't answer at first. The town watched. The wind carried the weight of years lost. Finally, she whispered, "Home isn't built with money, Elijah. It's built with staying." Elijah nodded, tears burning his eyes. "Then I'll stay," he said, "for as long as it takes." As they rode back toward the ranch together, whispers followed them, not of power but of redemption. And somewhere between the dust and the setting sun, Elijah realized that the greatest fortune he had ever abandoned was riding beside him, holding his son's hand. And if stories of redemption, family, and second chances move your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because every story you watch helps keep these powerful moments alive. The Cross Ranch had never felt so quiet. Its grand house, once filled with echoes of business deals and celebrations of profit, now held something far heavier, truth. Sarah sat near the window, wrapped in clean blankets, her eyes taking in the space like it didn't belong to her. Servants whispered, unsure how to treat the woman who had arrived as a beggar but carried the weight of the master's past. Elijah hovered like a man afraid to blink, afraid she might disappear again. Daniel never left her side. He talked endlessly about school, about the horse Elijah promised him, about how he'd always known his mother was alive. Sarah listened, smiling softly, But when night fell and the house grew still, the pain returned. Elijah sat across from her, hands clasped, pride stripped away. "I failed you," he said. "Every day I told myself you were better off without me. That lie made me rich." Sarah looked at him steadily. "And it made me poor," she replied. She told him everything then, the sickness after he left, the letters unanswered, the ranch foreclosed, the long walk into town with a child on her hip and hope slowly bleeding out of her. Elijah listened without interruption, each word carving into him deeper than any knife. He realized then that redemption wasn't a grand gesture. It was endurance. It was staying when it hurt. It was choosing people over profit every single day. The next morning, Elijah did something no one expected. He rode into town and signed away half his holdings. He funded shelters, schools, medical clinics. Not as charity, but as penance. When asked why, he said only, "Because wealth that forgets people isn't wealth at all." Some called him foolish. Others called him changed. Sarah watched from the porch as he worked himself into exhaustion, never complaining, never asking forgiveness, just earning it. Weeks passed. Sarah grew stronger. Laughter returned to the house. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Sarah stood beside Elijah at the fence where she once waited for him years ago. "I never stopped loving you," she said quietly. "But love needs proof." Elijah took her hand. "Then let my life be the proof," he answered. When Daniel ran toward them laughing, the sound echoed across the land like a blessing. Elijah Cross was still a rich cowboy, but now his wealth had meaning. He had learned that walking past suffering doesn't erase it. It only delays the reckoning, and sometimes the truth comes back in the voice of a child whispering words that shatter everything you thought you'd built. The winter came early that year, settling over the Cross Ranch like a final test sent by fate itself. Snow dusted the fences, the barns, the long road that once carried Elijah Cross away from everything that mattered. Now it felt like the land was watching him, waiting to see if this change in him was real, or just another promise he would abandon when things became difficult. Sarah's health wavered as the cold deepened. Years of hunger and hardship had left marks no blanket could erase. Some nights she coughed until Daniel clutched her hand in fear, and Elijah sat by the bed helpless, listening to every fragile breath. The doctor said the truth Elijah feared most: recovery would take time. Patience and peace, things money alone could not buy. And for the first time in his life, Elijah chose patience. He canceled trips, postponed deals, and let rivals take advantage while he stayed home, feeding the fire, reading to his son, and sitting silently beside the woman he once left behind. Word spread quickly. The same men who once praised his ambition now mocked his softness. They said Elijah Cross had gone weak, that love had dulled his edge. But when Elijah looked at Daniel asleep with his head against Sarah's shoulder, he knew something sharper than ambition had taken its place: responsibility. One night, as snow howled outside, Sarah asked Elijah the question she had carried for years. "Why didn't you come back?" Elijah didn't look away this time. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid of being poor again. Afraid of failing you. Afraid that if I returned without success, I'd be nothing in your eyes." Sarah closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "I never wanted success," she whispered. "I wanted you." That truth broke him more than any accusation ever could. He took her hands, rough and calloused now from a life she never should have lived, and pressed them to his chest. "I can't change what I did," he said, "but I swear I will die before I abandon you again." Sarah searched his face for a long moment, then nodded. Not forgiveness yet, but acceptance of effort. And sometimes that is where healing begins. Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow and something else too, the distance between them. Sarah grew stronger. Daniel grew bolder. And Elijah grew quieter, steadier, more present. One afternoon, a stranger arrived at the ranch, a well-dressed man from the city with contracts in hand, offering Elijah a fortune to sell the land beneath his feet. It was the kind of deal Elijah would once have signed without hesitation. He read the papers, then looked out across the fields where his son learned to ride, where Sarah laughed for the first time in years. Elijah tore the contract in half. "This land isn't for sale," he said. "Not anymore." When the man scoffed, Elijah replied calmly, "Some things cost more than money." The stranger left, shaking his head, and Daniel watched his father with awe. That night, Daniel asked, "Pa, does being rich mean having a lot of money?" Elijah smiled softly. "No, son," he said. It means having enough and knowing when to stop chasing more. The town that once whispered began to change its tune. People came not for handouts but for work, advice, help rebuilding their own lives. Elijah hired widows, taught orphaned boys ranch skills, funded schools where children were fed before they were taught. Sarah helped too, organizing meals, comforting those who reminded her of herself. Together they became something the town had never seen. Family that healed others simply by staying. One evening, under a sky painted with stars, Elijah stood with Sarah and Daniel on the porch. "I don't need forgiveness," Elijah said quietly. "I just need tomorrow." Sarah slipped her hand into his. "Then we'll face it together," she replied. Daniel wrapped his arms around them both. And in that moment, the past loosened its grip at last. Years later, when Elijah, Cross was no longer spoken of as the richest cowboy in Texas, but as the fairest. People told a story, a warning and a promise. They said he once walked past a beggar without seeing her, until his son opened his eyes. And that moment changed everything, because sometimes the greatest riches aren't found in gold or land, but in recognizing the people you almost lost and choosing, finally, to stay.